Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon. This back here, that's Bernard. He's my October co-host. He doesn't say a lot, but he shows up every day, and so we let him keep on coming. Anyway, today, I'm going to be sharing with you my recommendations for perfect books to read this October. If you're like me, you like reading spooky books all year long, but either way, whether you're an October spooky reader or an all-year spooky reader, I feel like I've got something here for everyone. And let me tell you, I've been reading so much good, like horror and just unsettling books lately that it was really difficult to nail down this list. But here we are, and today this is what I'm sticking with, and hopefully you will find something in here that you would like to read. Anyway, we're going to get started with one of the books I've recently read. I read this a few months ago, and I went into it knowing absolutely nothing about it aside from the blurb. Now, since it's come out, I feel like on social media and here on BookTube, it's been so hyped. And I worry, because you know when a book's so hyped and then you read it, it's sometimes easier to be let down than if you knew nothing about it. Not saying that's the case for this book, I have no idea. I only know my own experience, and it was amazing. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. I hate when that happens. Anyway, the book I'm talking about is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. This book was fantastic. If you love a good, creepy house story, if you love a book that leaves you at the end with that sort of slack-jawed, what did I just read feeling, this is the book for you. This book is about a couple that live in this house that they've recently bought. I can't remember their names. It's two women, Eve and I can't remember. Anyway, so they live in this house. One evening, one of the women is home alone, and there's a knock at the door, and she goes and opens it, and there is a family, and the dad is like, "Hey, we used to live here. Do you mind if we come in and like maybe I could show my kids around the house?" And like everything in this woman's body is like telling her not to do it, but she does. She doesn't know how to turn them away, and she lets them in. And let me tell you, that would never be me. No, that would never be me. Somebody knocks on the door and I'm not expecting you, I'm not going to answer it. Because I figure if it's someone I know, they'll text me and they'll be like, "I'm outside, open the door." So I will never be in that situation. Anyway, this was a 5-star read for me. One of my favorite books of the year. I would definitely recommend. Next up, this is a book that took me, I think, 3 years to read. I kept picking it up and putting it down and picking it up and putting it down. But I knew there was something in my heart that told me I was going to love it, to not give up on it. And I didn't. And I loved it. And this is The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters. This book, I don't even know where to begin with this book. Basically, it takes place in England, one post-war summer, it says. And there's this big house, this big grand estate. And the doctor, Dr. Faraday, he is called to this house to see a patient. And in the house lives a mother and a son and a daughter. And from there, it's sort of him becoming enmeshed in their story as things seem to get darker and sinister inside this house. And he and we try to figure out what's going on. I would say this is a mixture of literary fiction, like literary horror, I guess you'd call it, less genre horror. But it was fantastic. And I've heard people talking about other books of hers, and I can't wait to read them because this one was so amazing. Another 5-star. It says here now a major motion picture, so I'm going to have to look into that. Oh, I think this is the movie cover. And give that a watch. Next up, this one's a lot of fun. And this is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. Now this one is if you want to get a little more gruesome with it. If the idea of, so first of all, the story is told from the point of view of a woman who's in prison So she's telling us her story, why she's in prison. And her name is Dorothy. And what Dorothy likes to do, or liked to do, first of all, she was a food critic. And she's very passionate about food. And she's also very passionate about men and seducing them and maybe killing them, maybe eating them. And it's pretentious. I'll tell you that right now. It's absolutely pretentious, but like in the best possible way. The writing is out of this world. She'll say something and you're like, what? I can't wait to reread this because there were so many passages I had to stop and underline and reread and reread. The way she words things is so incredible. So yeah, a little pretentious, but like intentionally so, because Dorothy's pretentious, the character. And yeah, if you want it a little more gruesome and a little more, would recommend. Next up, we have another one that I've recently read, and that is Small Town Horror by Ronald Malfi. This was my first book from this author that I've read, but I've heard a lot of people talking about him all the time in all horror spaces. Everybody loves him. And wow, after having read this, I can definitely understand why this book was incredible. It's about 5 friends who come back to their hometown 20 years after a horrific incident because something's happening in the town and they've all got to come together. And I love those stories when it's like a group of friends from when they were teenagers have to come back together for something horrific that happened and is now tormenting them many years later. I just described the book twice in a row. Anyway, this book was fantastic. The characters were great. I thought it was incredibly spooky. Incredibly spooky. Yep. So, next up, we're just going to keep it moving. We have The Exorcist House by Nick Roberts. And I really wanted to include this one. Look at the glare from the from the light. This Nick Roberts, I think, is such an interesting author in that he's had such wild success that he's kind of drummed up on social media. And his books are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but I've loved watching the way that he's just the way he's gotten this success. I'm a member of a Facebook group called Books of Horror. That's where I heard about this book. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody's still talking about it now a couple of years later. And I know he's got a sequel and I think a third part coming out for this book. And it's just been really fun watching the success he's been having. And it's well deserved. These books are great. Now, this is the only one so far that I've read, but I hope to read more. Anyway, this is about a family that moves into a sort of house kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. It's 1994, and there's a weird room in the basement. And, it's all barred up. There's crucifixes, the whole bit. And, really strange things start happening in this house, and it kept me on the edge of my seat. It kept me spooked the whole time, and I thought it was great, and I would definitely recommend. Now, next up, my friends, no list, in my opinion, no list of mine would be complete without a Stephen King book. And of course, there are so many. His novels are great. His short story collections are arguably my favorite, but recently I've been rereading some of his books. I reread Pet Sematary for my podcast, and for this month we're reading The Shining. For me, The Shining is the scariest. At least it was. It'll be interesting. I haven't read it in about 15 years. We watch the movie all the time, but of course they're very different. But I'm so excited to reread this. And I feel like you probably already know what this is about, but it's about a family that goes to a hotel up in the mountains to be the winter caretakers for. It's Jack, Wendy, and their son Danny. And once they're up there and isolated, once the snow comes, there's no getting out. There's no contacting, the mainland or Is that what you call it? I'm used to like water. Okay. There's no contacting anybody. They are isolated. And Jack starts to lose it. He starts to lose it. And I love this story. It scares me. It scares me so bad. So I can't wait to read it again. Next up, speaking of Stephens, we've got I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, Stephen Graham Jones is a fairly new author to me. I've read, I think, 4 or 5 of his books so far. And I know he has many. He has many, many more than that. And I can't wait to tackle the backlist, which I will be doing soon, and I'll show you now in a second. But this book, of all that I've read so far, this book is my favorite Stephen Graham Jones book. There is no author alive, now or maybe ever, that writes horror the way this man does. It is so, the way he writes, and that goes right down to his acknowledgments section, which read like a story all their own. There's no one writing like he does. I don't even know how to describe it. But if you've read one of his books, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, I Was a Teenage Slasher. I loved it. This was my cup of tea. It's about this young man named Tolly Driver. I think he's like 17. Him and his best friend, Amber. And it's kind of the memoir written 17 years later of a man looking back on his life growing into a killer, a slasher. It's sort of a coming of age tale from the point of view of someone who becomes a teenage slasher who doesn't really want to. And the way that this takes so many horror, like slasher tropes, and weaves them into the story in such a brilliant manner, I will never get over this book. I will never get over it. It was so good. If you haven't read it and you love horror, whether that's horror movies or horror books, the slasher genre in general, you need to read this book. It is so good. It is so good. Read every Stephen Graham Jones book. I think he has like 40 books. And he puts them out so quickly. He's got a new one coming out, I think, in March called The Buffalo Hunter. Like the Buffalo Hunter? I may have that wrong, and I'm filming on my phone, so I can't look it up. Anyway, I've got this one here, Mapping the Interior. It's a slight novella, so tiny. And I'm going to be reading this really soon, and I can't wait. I can't wait. Stephen Graham Jones. Anyway, next up is one of my favorite haunted house stories of all time. And it Will Just Be Us by Joe Kaplan. If you've been around my channel for a while, you're probably like, girl, we've heard you talk about that at length many times. And I know, and I'm going to keep on doing it because this book is so good. It's about a woman who returns home to the home where she grew up, where her mom is, and her sister's there, and her sister's pregnant, going to be having a baby soon. And this house is haunted, capital H, haunted. And just the way that the hauntings are described in this book scared me so bad. Now, of course, what scares me and what scares you aren't necessarily going to be the same things. But if you like a good haunted house story, this is it. This is it. It creeped me out for weeks afterwards. The way, so her sister's pregnant. And so the house has a way of showing you things that have happened in the past, things that are going to happen in the future. Because to the house, it can't differentiate. To the house, it doesn't know what's already happened or what's going to happen. And so she keeps getting visions. Like she can see it playing out in front of her. Of a child doing terrible, terrible things. And she's like, in her heart, she knows that's the baby in her sister's womb at that time. And it's terrifying. It is terrifying. And I would recommend It Will Just Be Us. Next, another book that definitely deals with haunted spaces is Gravenfrost by Peter Hammerberg. This book was also discussed on my podcast, THC Library. Anyway, I've mentioned it on this channel before, but I had to tell you again because like it's perfect for this time of year. It's got that eerie atmosphere, but it's also got that humor that's just so fun to read. The way Peter creates characters and situations and just the way that he tells the story is so, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just very cheeky. It's very saucy, and it's a ton of fun. And this is about a man, Will, and he is he's a detective, and he's called to this town because there's crazy things going on at this place that used to be, well, you know what, I'm not even going to tell you too much. You need to read it. If you like those kinds of creepy stories where, you know, it just gets right under your skin, but you're having so much fun and you don't want to put it down, you have to read it. And I've got videos on it here. You can go check out the podcast where me and my friend Krista had a heck of a time reading it and talking about it. And we also had a conversation with Peter on the podcast as well, so you can go and check all of that out. Check it all out. Now, the final two, I thought we'd tone it down a notch with the spookiness. These two are more for different tastes. First of all, we have Foe by Ian Reid. Now, I could have changed this out with any Ian Reid story. They're still scary, don't get me wrong, but they're not scary in that really scary kind of way. For me, what Ian's books tend to do is they tend to build a atmosphere of dread. And you know that there's something very wrong, but you don't know what. So for this one, for Foe, it's about a couple, Junior and Hen, and they live out in the middle of nowhere, and somebody knocks on the door and says that Junior has been chosen to go into space. And Hen will remain here, but not to worry. So he'll be gone for like, I think it's 2 years. Not to worry, they will be bringing a replacement for him. And she will hardly be able to tell the difference between the real Junior and the replacement. And that's the story. And it's like the whole time you're like, you've just got a bad feeling. And the same, his other two books that I've read, I'm Thinking of Ending Things and We Spread, they're both the same. You're spooked, but you don't entirely know why until the very end. And it's so good. It's so good. And then finally, we're taking it to a real light spot. I love this book so much. So much. And that's Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. Get out of here. Get out of here. What does this say? Coffee books and Oxford commas. Anyway, I love this book. I love this movie. I love everything about all of it. This is actually a 4-book series. This book came out years ago, I think in the 90s, early 90s. Let me just see here. Yeah, 95. So this came out in 95, and then the next 3 books came out like in the last 6-7 years. So there's a big break in between, and you can read the books either as they came out, or you can read them in chronological order, which would not put this as the first one, which I think is really neat. So they're all fantastic, but this one just has a special place in my heart. And if you want something that's a little, you know, a little witchy, a little magical, but not scary, this is the book for you. If you haven't read it already, it's great. This is actually the 25th anniversary edition. I didn't realize. It's beautiful, and I love it. And I love Alice Hoffman. I love all of Alice Hoffman's books, but those ones in particular. So I think that's going to do it for me for today. I didn't know this video was going to be this long, but I shouldn't be surprised, I guess. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again really soon with another video. And, you know, Bernard sends his warmest regards.